I get asked this question a lot. How do you
Right.
make the switch from a technical role to a business role, whether it's marketing, sales, or whatever? And, some of it was the work that needed to be done at the time actually required more technical expertise than some of that pure marketing that you think about.
So welcome to the Meaningful Jobs podcast season 2. I'm your host Adrian, and today we're extremely honored to welcome Richard to our podcast, who will be talking a little bit about his entrepreneurial journey, how he got to where he is, and we'll also talk about the podcast he's doing, which is, I think, quite different from what his business is. So how are you, Richard? Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, hey Adrian, it's great to be here. Yeah, I'm doing great, enjoying summer, and yeah,
Yeah,
excited to
yeah,
talk to you.
that's good. That's good. Summer's I think nearly ending already. Now it's August.
No, don't say that.
Um, in the UK actually, which is where I'm based, there has been no summer at all. The weather's been extremely cold for some reason. So I can't really say I've enjoyed my summer, but I'm glad you're enjoying yours so far. Um, so let's begin by, talking a little bit about your career. So I know that you have your own business now, but when you first started off, the industries you were in were completely different. So can you walk us through that?
Yeah, for sure. So my story begins all the way back to my childhood. And really, I always wanted to be an engineer as long as I could remember. And in particular around electronics. My dad worked for Radio Shack, which was a big, retail electronics store back in
Yeah.
my day. So I'm dating myself a little bit. And I had other family members who were engineering. So that's been my path through high school and through college. But I went to college part time and I couldn't get a full time engineering job until I finished, which was way down the road. So I had the opportunity to switch to business and I moved into marketing. And I was thinking to myself, well, if it doesn't work out in marketing, because I had no idea what it was,
Yeah.
this is going back almost 20 years ago. I could always go back and become an engineer when I finished my degree. And that's kind of how it all started. And I just found myself really enjoying the work I was doing in marketing. And, that's the majority of my career has been kind of in that field.
So, engineering and marketing are two industries that not a lot of people might immediately relate. So, how did you actually make that switch?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I often reflect on this because given where I am in my career, I get asked this question a lot. How do you
Right.
make the switch from a technical role to a business role, whether it's marketing, sales, or whatever? And, some of it was the work that needed to be done at the time actually required more technical expertise than some of that pure marketing that you think about, right? So when someone thinks about marketing, you think about advertising and promotion. You think about TV ads, you think about digital ads, billboards, but there's a lot of aspects of marketing. And one of my favorite descriptions or definitions is marketing is creating, communicating, and delivering value to customers.
Hmm.
So the communication part is what everybody knows, but the creating and delivering you don't really think about. And that's really where I spent most of my career, is in that creation and delivery part. So that's
Mhm.
the element of marketing. But that was the work that needed to be done. And I would also say that it was probably a little bit of good luck, right? Being in the right place at the right time and having the right connections to make that change, and having a good network. Because if I fast forward 10, 20 years later, it probably isn't as easy to make that change as maybe it was back then.
Yeah, in all the interviews that I've done so far, I think the theme about networking comes up a lot, not just what you said, but from other guests as well. I guess it's well, the million-dollar question is, how do you build up that network in the first place?
Well, it's going to seem a little obvious, but you have to do the work. You have to do the networking, which, when I have these conversations with my mentees, they're not always comfortable with doing that, right? If you have to put yourself in situations where you're going to network, whether it's company events or whether you're setting up one-on-ones with peers, or maybe folks that are higher levels than you, uh, some folks just aren't comfortable with that, or just don't know how to do it, or don't know what to say. So I think that that's part of it, is like, is actually just going out and doing it. And then you'll realize that if you're meeting with, let's say you're not a manager level. So if you're meeting with a manager, you're meeting with a director or senior director, more times than not, they're actually going to be happy to chat with you. They're going to be happy to get to know you, get to know your work, get to know your aspirations. And if you build that relationship over time, even advocate and sponsor you. So,
Mm.
it's really identifying who in the business that you want to connect with. Maybe it's somebody in the field or in the function that you want to go, or maybe it's somebody who has similar experiences than you that, can really help you. That's the first step, is identifying who those folks could be. But second step is actually taking action and meeting with them.
Yeah, it's a really good point and a really obvious point that a lot of people overlook, because networking might not be for everybody, but it's a necessary ingredient for people to succeed, in their careers. And I think you made a really interesting point about sponsorships. I guess what you're saying is, you've got to find somebody to advocate for you, right? Like in the workplace or outside of the workplace. So how did you manage to find your own sponsors?
It's through relationships. So, it really starts kind of with that relationship or mentorship, and then over time it grows, right? So if you
Mm,
demonstrate the kind of person that you are, the work that you can do, then others will start to talk about you in the spaces that you're not are in already. And that's what you're really looking for. But most folks think, well, if I just do the work, if I just put my head down and I do the work, my results will show, right? My work will show. And for sure, you have to do that, but that's table stakes. The
mm,
next part is to build those relationships with others. So when the opportunities come up, they're like, you know what? I think Adrian is a good fit for this. So you're already top of mind for the hiring manager or decision makers for those roles. But if they don't know you, they don't know your work, and they don't know your aspiration, it's going to be a little bit harder as you're going through that process. So consider it like sales, right? If you're doing cold calling, what's the likelihood of success versus warm leads?
mm.
Right? It's going to be a lot harder to convert somebody in a cold call versus someone who's already knows you, already has some level of awareness, and feels like you could fit the needs. So I would say, not to really compare it to sales, but I think it's, a relevant analogy to a little bit of how it works.
Yeah, I really agree with what you said. And you also said that you've got your own mentees, I think. Are these, part of your business, or is this, separate from it, but you just mentor them?
Yeah, so the mentees are just folks that, come to me. Either I work with them directly or I don't work with them, and
Mm,
they want to learn about my career. They want to learn how to, the most common questions I get is, how do you make the switch from, a technical field to business, is probably the most common. But I've also had mentees through formal mentorship programs where I've signed up to say, I'll be a mentor. You assign someone to me based on, what I can provide or offer, and based on what they need. And that's been really fulfilling. That's been a lot of fun
mm.
for me to learn and coach based on their aspirations, but also share a little bit of my experiences to see if, they can that can help them navigate kind of their own career.
Just rewinding a bit about what you said about sponsorships and having somebody to advocate for you. For a lot of people, it might be a struggle for them to say upfront, to certain senior people with seemingly a hidden agenda, right? How do you frame this to your mentees, or how do you explain this to people that perhaps it's not just about your hidden agenda, but how you can think of it in a more positive way? Because that's quite a struggle for some people, I think.
Yeah. I guess it depends on what they're looking to do. I don't know why it would have to be a hidden agenda, right? If your
Mm,
aspiration is to grow within a company and grow your career, it's going to benefit both you and the company, right? If you bring good skills and results to the company, it's only going to benefit the company to promote you and put you in those positions where you can do those things. So I don't know why it would need to be a hidden agenda. I mean, I think
mm,
you should be upfront with those, mentors or those folks in higher level positions. Um, so they can better help you. Because if you have a hidden agenda, then I don't know how well they're going to be able to help you if
Mm,
you don't really kind of give them direction. Now, if it's a case of not being able to trust certain people or not kind of building that trust, then that's something that you have to figure out. You have to, I 100%, you have to find somebody who not only you can connect with, but who you
yeah.
can trust.
So, after your stint in marketing, you set up your own business. So, can you tell us, how you reached that stage and what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I'm doing a little bit of both, right? So I'm doing, a 9 to 5, and I'm doing more program management and other areas outside of marketing. And I'm also a host of a podcast and
Yeah.
building, a digital community, which, for me is a lot of fun because throughout my career, like I mentioned, I've been doing more so on that creating and delivering value and not so much on the communicating. But as you know, even through COVID in the last 3 years, digital has just exploded. And it's been an area of interest of mine around digital marketing and a lot of the areas that I just hadn't had a lot of work experience in. So, what I've really been doing is just kind of learning and testing and building this kind of digital platform, kind of centered around the podcast and centered around running, and looking to see, is this something I can build, a viable business out of? How do I help folks like myself, everyday runners, achieve their goals? And how do I turn that into a business, kind of through this service? So that's kind of
Mm.
the journey I am on now. And that, that's been a lot of fun. And I'm learning and growing through, the work I'm doing there.
That seems a lot you're doing. It's three things that you're struggling. Sorry, you're trying to balance, and you've got your other commitments as well. You've got friends, family, obviously. So how do you juggle all this?
Well, you said it right. The struggle is real. I
Yeah,
mean,
I try not to
it's
use that
definitely
word
hard.
actually, but I
Yeah.
guess it is to some extent.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. I get this question a lot. How do I do all of
Mm,
it? I mean, I also run, right? And I do my races and I volunteer. So it is a lot. A couple of things. One is some of my core values are really centered around helping others. And I find that throughout my almost my entire career, I've been in industries and positions where I can do that, where I can help others, whether it's in my 9 to 5, whether it's in the business, whether it's volunteering. So that gives me energy to do the things I'm doing. The next
mm.
thing is, it's really around balance and prioritization. So I don't do everything well all the time, if that makes sense. But, I try to really focus on the areas that are really important to me, and I try to give it as much time and attention, and then not to overcommit. So it's not an easy thing to do, but, it's really about prioritization, but also making sure that, sometimes I need to spend more time in one area and sometimes I need to spend more time in another.
Yeah, and you know, it's difficult balancing things already, and it's, I guess, to some extent even more difficult to see growth in your business because very rarely does a business go become successful overnight. So, which stage are you at now? Would you say you're still at the grinding stage? And how do you see your business going?
Yeah, 100% at the grinding
Yeah.
stage. It's yeah, just working through it. But it's a lot of fun because I'm growing, I'm learning, and I'm seeing that progress. But it's still early stages. And then I would also say one thing, kind of back to like, how do I balance? One
Yeah.
thing that I have not been good at, throughout my career, throughout my life, is saying no.
Hmm.
And it sounds negative, like, don't say no, like, say yes. You always hear, like, if an opportunity is presented to you, say yes, just go after it. And I think that's true, but there comes to a point where you're going to say yes, but you can't do it. So you really should have said no, because you're not going to be able to deliver. So that's something that I feel like I've gotten a lot better at least over the
Hmm.
last couple of years. Is there's just certain things that just don't fall on that priority list. There's still good things to do, I still want to do them, but they're not the
Yeah.
top things that I need to do. And I've said no. And that's kind of freed me up to focus on the areas that are important.
So how do you determine whether something's in your priority list and something that isn't?
Yeah. It's really about, as maybe as selfish as it might sound, it's really about your end goals, right? So you
Mm.
think about, I have very specific goals. Okay. Does this activity help me in any one of those goals? Maybe it does in one goal, maybe a little bit, but all of these other things are really what's going to drive, those goals. And that's one way to that I kind of look at it. Now, it doesn't say that all of my goals are all professional or all of my goals are all family. Like, I have goals in each, but it's to say, like, within my professional goals, does it help me here? Probably not. Then it's a no, or it's a not now, which, I've done as well. I've said, you know what, maybe this is something I can revisit in 6 months from now. So, case in point, I love to write a book. I love, being in marketing for almost 20 years. I love to write. I love to speak. I love to write a book one day. It's not really going to get me to my goal that I'm chasing after right now. So that's something that's a not now, as an example.
So I guess it's more like a balance between short-term and long-term goals. Like you can't do everything at once. So you've got
That
to,
Yeah,
space out things, I guess. And
that's part of it.
I also picked up a point earlier when you said, you want to center yourself around helping others. Can you specifically tell us what you mean by that and how does it tie into the work you do?
Yeah, so I've been very, very fortunate. I kind of fell into this. The first industry that I worked in is the building systems industry, and more specifically, fire and life safety. So the fire alarms in the buildings that tell people to get out when there's a fire. So this is an industry where, we're helping save lives, right? With
Mm,
the products that we bring to market and the work that we're doing helps save lives. Well, the industry that I was in. So I kind of fell into it, but I spent a lot of my career doing that work. And then I switched to healthcare. So again, another industry where, we're helping people through the work that we do. So I feel like through the work, I'm, not to knock on any other industry, not to say that, if you're in any kind of service industry or something that's outside of what I just talked about, that it's not good, that it's bad. That's not the case. I'm saying for me, I enjoy helping others and being in industries or positions where I can do so. So um, that's mostly where it is. But beyond that, the volunteer work that I do, either, as part of the company or on the side. So I volunteer or support pancreatic cancer awareness in memory of
mm,
my mother-in-law. So I've
mm.
done walks and I've done fundraisers, and, I've had certain companies on my podcast to raise awareness. So that's been a lot of fun. And then, kind of going to the podcast and business, that's all about helping people achieve their health and fitness goals. So throughout my almost my entire career, and a lot of the work that I've done, again, kind of goes back to, can I make a difference for somebody, and can I help people through the work I'm doing?
I'm curious, as in, if you realize how important helping others are in your early stage of your career, or was it something that just suddenly clicked and you were like, oh, I need to focus more on other people rather than on myself? So was this something that's always started out, or was it like something that you picked up?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It might have always been there, but I would say
Mm,
that it didn't become apparent to me until later in my career, because I worked in that first industry for about 4 years right out of school. And then I stepped out of it. I went into a different industry, which is a lot of fun. But then I could see the difference in the work I was doing in one versus the other. So it wasn't until I went back to that fire and life safety industry, I think that's probably when it started to click. And I started to get more involved in not only the day to day developing and selling products. It was, what good can we do for the industry? What good can we do for people through the work that we're doing? And I think that's probably when it became more apparent to me. So it wasn't in the beginning, it was probably a little bit farther along in my journey. So that's why I consider myself lucky, because honestly, I kind of fell into that industry.
but I think, as you said, you've got a good network, which opened up more doors for you. So I guess things sometimes go in circles. You just never know, when it's going to happen. Um, I'm interested in what you've got to say for people who are perhaps struggling in their careers. Any advice that you might give them based on your own experience?
Yeah. Yeah. And this one I sometimes get, and I struggle with this question because, like I said before, I feel like I've always known what I've wanted to do. And
Mm.
when I made the switch, I just made the switch and I just kind of went in a different direction. But I never really struggled with that part. So it's been hard for me to coach others on it.
Sorry.
But
So, were you adamant about starting a business from a really young age? So did you
I
know about them?
was,
You was.
I
Wow.
was,
Okay.
yeah. But the interesting thing is I didn't. So I started to do the work, but then I fell into a 9 to 5, just kind of given my circumstance. I fell into a 9 to 5. I put myself through school. And it wasn't until later on in life, I'm like, you know what? I really feel like this is something I need to do. So that's kind of led me down, the path that I am now. But yeah, from an early age, I wanted to do engineering and I wanted to do it for myself, my own business. But I just didn't
Hmm.
start that way. I think it's, just kind of came later in life.
Because even though you said you knew what you wanted to do from a young age, then there's a lot of people who might think the same, but then they're like, "Oh, I'm burnt out already," or they might reach a certain position within a company and they say, "Well, actually, the money isn't enough. There must be more to money than, um, there must be more to life than money, right?" So, when you talk to these people, um, would you say you've got any advice for them, or is this, kind of a difficult question too?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, money's important, but it's also everything else that you're getting. So I think a couple of things. Number one is, are you growing? Are you learning? Like sometimes it's a case of, yeah, I'm just kind of doing the same thing every day and I'm not really being challenged. And, you know, it's I have a lot of stress related to it because I'm not enjoying it. So I mean, stress is normal, but it's even worse if you're not having a good time and you're not enjoying
Yeah.
it. I don't really like who I work with. So you got all of those things. So I think, starting to think about, well, what is it maybe about what you're doing now or what you've done in the past that you like to do. So if you're in a role that's in, that someone might tell me, oh, well, I enjoy the strategic part of my role, but it's not a strategy role.
Mm.
So maybe there's some options, right? Maybe within different functions, there's some options to find a strategy role. So I think it kind of depends on. So my advice would be, first is think about what are the things that you really enjoy doing, and then start to think about what role could be out there that you could do that kind of work, and then start to explore it. So I've had mentees go and do, I don't know if I mean, maybe you could just call it networking, but going from, function to function, shadowing people, seeing what they do and seeing if something clicks. And if
Mm.
something clicks, making that connection and kind of setting them on a path to move there. So, but it really kind of starts with, what do you enjoy doing? What do you like?
Mm.
What don't you like? And let's figure out how to kind of move you towards something that you enjoy doing, because that, you're going to get a bit of fulfillment there.
Yeah, I think the enjoyment bit is very important, and um, my struggle sometimes with this and with this concept is that there's a group of people, right, who say you need to do what you love. Then there's another group of people who say you can't just do what you love, you've got to also make ends meet. So for you personally, do you have a way of balancing both, or do you just do what you like and try and see how it goes?
No, I 100% agree with that. You have to find, I mean, so like if you're running your own business as an example, yes, you could have a passion, but if there's not a need for that in the market, you're not gonna sell anything, right? So
Yeah.
you definitely need to find that point, that intersection between what you enjoy doing and what the market absolutely needs. And that's kind of on this journey that I'm on, like at the moment, right? So I'm
Mm.
doing what I like. I haven't really quite figured out, all of what the market needs. So right now,
Right.
I'm still helping people, I'm learning, I'm growing, but at some point I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm going to apply everything I've learned in my career, and I'm going to get to that point where I figured out that market needs. So I completely agree with you. I think it would I think it would be tough for someone just to go out and say, yes, I'm passionate about this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to become a millionaire by the end of the year.
Doesn't really
I'm
work
not
that
sure how
way.
far you're going to get if there's not, a real market need for what you're, offering.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether you are past the stage of researching about market demand, or are you still in that stage? So, by the looks of it, you are still in that stage, but um, I guess you chose a route where you still make the plunge to a business when you haven't had all these things figured out.
Yeah, and I think it depends on a few things, right? Especially if you're going from like a 9 to 5 to running your own business. You could certainly do that if you have if you have an idea, you've tested some things and you're starting to see some things work, you have money saved in the bank, right? I think there's a lot of information out there about like when's the right time to make that shift. So don't go out on the ledge if you don't, if you haven't really figured out a way to make money, and you've lost your lifeline on the 9 to 5. So in my case, I'm doing both, right? I'm doing a
Yeah.
9 to 5, I'm doing the business, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm piloting, I'm going to see what works. And then someday I can make a decision on what I want to do. Do I want to stay the course on what I'm doing, or do I want to do something different?
So naturally, I'm going to ask, what your business is specifically. So you're doing your podcast, you are starting, a healthcare business as well. Can you, tell us what you plan to do next, or, how are you achieving your business goals?
Yeah. So, I mean, my idea, my vision, my aspiration is to help others achieve their health and fitness goals and through running. And a few things. Number one, just health and fitness in general, because I feel like if you're healthy, you're going to show up better to everything else that you're doing in your life, right? Whether it's professional, whether it's personal. So I want to help people do that. Now I talk about running because that's what I know. I was a runner in high school. I took a number of years off. I got back into running a few years ago. And through sharing my story, I've realized that there are others who are in the situation that I was in, and they need a little bit of help and guidance to get to even where I am now. And I believe that they can. So, really, the idea is to share inspiring stories and resources and help for those folks who are not moving today, they're not active today, to get to a point with their, reaching their health and fitness goals. And again, through running. So that's kind of my aspiration of what I'm doing. Now, how I turn it into a business. Well, through a podcast, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? You could do sponsorship, you could do affiliates, you could sell products, digital courses. So, like, I'm piloting a few things, but really, this is a stage where I'm learning the craft, I'm building it, I'm growing the podcast, I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And then along the way, I'm starting to see, oh, well, this is what my community needs. Okay, let me go and try to pilot and build this, right? Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let me try to do something different. And that's kind of where I am. But ultimately, the way I would monetize is through the help that I provide my running community to help them reach their health and fitness goals.
Sounds like a really solid business plan. I can't really fault any of that. So, just lastly, before we end the interview, um, can you tell us more specifically about your running related podcast? So, what kind of content do you cover in your podcast, and how do you help people with your podcast?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I love talking about it. So, the name of the podcast is called Inspire to Run Podcast. And I bring on everyday runners to share their stories, why they started running, what their journey was like, and to help others who are kind of going through similar things. But I also bring on fitness experts, whether they're running coaches or nutritionists, to help give that, scientific guidance on, things that you can do in your journey. And I started to bring on brands on the show, which has been a really cool, a
Wow.
little bit twist to the show, where they can share a little bit about their products and how their products are helping the running community. So those are the types of guests that I brought on. So it's a good spectrum, but very diverse group of guests, and it's a lot of fun.
What kind of brands have you gotten hold of? Have you asked Nike or Adidas to come over?
Yeah, so there is a shoe company that I use that's not on yet. We're going to do the recording, but they're coming up soon. But I brought on brands like nutrition brands like Dot Fit.
Yeah.
They're mostly known for the work with a lot of the big sports agencies, and I brought on Tailwind Nutrition. Had on Incrediwear, which is they're more like for recovery, for your joints, like your knees and your arms. Great conversation there. I actually have a couple more gear brands I'm gonna bring on that I
Wow.
haven't done the recording yet. So, but those are just to name some of the ones that I brought on. But I'm super excited about all
Yeah.
the connections I've made through this.
And you're not charging them to come to your podcast, right? It's more like a networking activity that you're doing.
Yeah, it's benefiting them because they're getting that brand awareness. Is benefiting me because I'm able to share, their information with with the listeners. So it's not a
Yeah,
30-minute advertisement about their products. So we're talking about like real topics that runners go through, like recovery, like nutrition. So we're really learning through this process. And oh, by the way, we have some great products that I'm sharing from Tailwind or from DotFit. So no, so I don't charge them to come
I
on the
see.
podcast. Yeah, I guess.
Well, it's been a great interview. I love talking to you about your business, your career. Wish you all the best. And just lastly, for our audience, do like, subscribe, and follow the Meaningful Jobs podcast. And I'll be including Richard's podcast links into the podcast description as well. And you can check his running podcast if you've got time. So thanks, Richard, for coming over, and wish you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.